Ancient annals record a conflict that radically altered the destiny of the Hellenic world. The clash between Athens, the powerful leader of the vast Delian League, an alliance encompassing numerous city-states and colonies, and Sparta, heading the formidable Peloponnesian League, became an unprecedented struggle. On one side, Athens possessed an unparalleled naval fleet, embodying innovation and power across the seas. On the other, Sparta relied on one of the most disciplined and experienced infantry armies ever to exist on land. This historical confrontation was preceded by recent, yet already legendary, events. Just decades earlier, the Athenians had achieved a triumphant victory over Persian invaders in the famous Battle of Marathon. Then, 10 years later, vastly superior Persian forces suffered a series of devastating defeats. These tragic events began in the pass of Thermopylae, where 300 Spartans valiantly fought to the last man, holding back the enemy's advance and creating an immortal myth of self-sacrifice. This was followed by a colossal naval defeat of the Persian fleet at Salamis, inflicted by skilled Athenian sailors. Finally, at Plataea, the Persian land army was definitively routed, leading to its destruction and a complete abandonment of their conquest plans. These events not only saved Greece from subjugation but also laid the groundwork for future conflicts. Over the next 50 years, both great powers, Athens and Sparta, pursued a coordinated anti-Persian policy, actively supporting any actions aimed at containing Persian influence in the eastern Mediterranean. It was this shared objective that allowed a fragile, yet existing, peace to be maintained between Athens and Sparta. To effectively counter the Persian naval threat, the Athenians formed the Delian League. However, by gradually strengthening its control over its members, Athens transformed this initially defensive coalition into a true maritime empire, levying tribute from its subject states. Following their triumph in the Persian Wars, Athens, basking in luxury generously funded by allied polis, became an object of widespread envy. The city was adorned with magnificent structures, and its naval fleet numbered 300 triremes. Each of these formidable vessels was propelled by the coordinated efforts of 170 professional rowers, whose skill ensured Athenian dominance at sea. Thus, two mighty powers, one relying on its fleet, the other on its invincible infantry, inexorably approached a confrontation whose repercussions would echo through the ages. In the era preceding the Persian Wars, Corinth was the undisputed naval hegemon. However, as Athens grew stronger, its fleet, outnumbering Corinth's by 3-1, began to incite rebellions in Corinthian colonies and threaten vital trade routes. For 15 years, marked by a series of localized conflicts known as the First Peloponnesian War, Sparta challenged Athens. In one ambiguous engagement, the Spartans claimed victory over the Athenian army, while Athens continued to build its naval power. Key developments during this period included the extensive reconstruction and fortification of the Athenian walls, as well as the construction of the fortified road connecting the city to the port of Piraeus. This strategic measure allowed Athens to maintain complete independence at sea, even when enemy armies ravaged the surrounding lands. This tense period concluded with the signing of the so-called 30 Years' Peace between the two polis, though this treaty lasted for less than half its intended duration. Despite the truce, the enmity between Athens and Corinth did not subside. In 431 BCE, Corinth persuaded Sparta and the Peloponnesian League to declare war on Athens, aiming to put an end to the burgeoning Athenian Empire. The initial phase of this large-scale conflict, known as the Second Peloponnesian War, or simply the Peloponnesian War, was named the Archidamian War. The war entered its active phase. During this period, Sparta adopted a tactic of systematically devastating the agricultural land surrounding Athens, with the clear aim of provoking a decisive battle. However, the far-sighted Athenians, anticipating such a maneuver from the Spartans, swiftly arranged for uninterrupted grain supplies from Egypt and numerous colonies located along the Aegean and Black Sea coasts. Athens' strategy, in turn, involved establishing a total blockade of the Peloponnesian Peninsula, depriving it of trade and supplies, as well as conducting sudden raids on Sparta's allies at every opportunity. Initially, it seemed the Athenians held the dominant position in this asymmetric war of attrition, meticulously planned years in advance by the distinguished Athenian politician Pericles. However, the population from the surrounding rural areas flocked en masse into Athens, seeking protection behind the city walls. In the early stages of this protracted conflict, this influx of people had been anticipated, and wealthy Athens, thanks to its well-developed logistics chains, had more than enough provisions to feed all the inhabitants of the overcrowded city. Nevertheless, one circumstance proved entirely unpredictable. Contaminated batches of grain, carrying plague pathogens, rapidly spread throughout the densely populated city. Initially, the polis held firm, buoyed by Pericles' powerful and charismatic rhetoric. But, tragically, approximately a quarter of the Athenians, including Pericles himself and his sons, fell victim to this devastating epidemic before it finally exhausted its deadly force. At the height of the epidemic, mercenary soldiers flatly refused to fight for Athens, and the Spartans, gripped by fear of the deadly plague, suspended their military campaigns near the Athenian walls. Ironically, it was the extensive naval blockade of the Peloponnese, organized by Athens, that inadvertently prevented plague-infected grain from reaching Sparta and its allies. Recovering from the shock, the surviving Athenians adopted a far more aggressive strategy. They significantly expanded the scope of their raids and began constructing fortified strongholds along the Peloponnesian coast. Helots, the Spartan slaves whose numbers were 10 times that of the Spartans themselves, were actively encouraged to flee to these new fortifications. This move placed considerable pressure on Sparta, forcing it to deploy significant forces to defend its own territories. This period of confrontation concluded with the signing of the so-called Peace of Nicias, intended to last for 50 years. However, despite the formal agreement, peace was never fully established, as both sides of the conflict almost immediately resumed hostile actions, first through proxies and then directly. In 415 BCE, the Athenian state devised an ambitious plan designed to secure their undisputed dominance, the conquest of the prosperous city-state of Syracuse, located in Sicily. This strategically vital center, alongside Athens and Carthage, played a key role in Mediterranean trade. Under the command of the young and ambitious Athenian politician Alcibiades, the large-scale military expedition proved catastrophic for Athens. The polis suffered colossal losses, over 10,000 hoplites, who formed the backbone of the heavy infantry, and 2/3 of its powerful fleet. While the ships could be replaced, the irreplaceable loss was 30,000 professional rowers, whose skills and years of training could not be quickly replenished. This immense loss of manpower was critical for maintaining naval supremacy and represented a strategic void that Athens could not fill. The chain of tragic events continued to unfold. After setbacks at sea and on land, Sparta dealt another blow by liberating 20,000 Athenian slaves working in vital silver mines. This action not only deprived Athens of a significant portion of its workforce but also undermined a crucial source of economic stability and military funding. In an attempt to replenish its treasury, Athens drastically increased the tribute demanded from its vassal states. However, this measure provoked large-scale revolts in Ionia, and this period of conflict became known as the Ionian War. War, a relentless force, unfurled its banners across ancient Greece, where a tragedy of betrayal and shifting hegemonies played out. The Athenian general Alcibiades, facing the prospect of inevitable retribution for his military failures, made the fateful decision to defect to Sparta. This move became a valuable acquisition for the Spartans, especially at a time when the Persian Empire was generously financing their ambitions. Persia, closely monitoring the balance of power, viewed the Athenian realm as a growing threat to its interests and sought to weaken its position. Thanks to Persian subsidies, Sparta was able to begin rebuilding and expanding its fleet, significantly strengthening its naval forces. Combined with the support of Corinthian allies, this led to the crushing defeat of the Athenian fleet at the Battle of Aegospotami. Athens, stripped of its naval power, found itself defenseless in the face of the Spartan siege and was forced to capitulate. However, the Spartan hegemony that emerged after the Peloponnesian War proved short-lived. Sparta's vulnerability lay in its limited human resources, the number of Spartan warriors, sustained by a strict military social system, was insufficient to effectively govern an extensive empire. This demographic constraint prevented Sparta from consolidating its power for a prolonged period. Ultimately, a series of exhausting conflicts following the Peloponnesian War paved the way for the emergence of a new power. Philip of Macedon, father of Alexander the Great, seized this moment, conquering the fragmented and weakened Greek city-states, thereby altering the geopolitical landscape of the ancient world.